let me ask you a question. It's one you've probably asked yourself anyway. Stanley or Smudger? The answer probably comes down to preferred canon, and that's where things get a bit tricky for me. Truth be told, I love the Smudger episode just as much as I love the Stanley story. It creates a weird 50-50 since they're basically the same character. But if you've been around my channel for long enough, you know Smudger isn't a new thing. He was one of the first 009 models I ever attempted. And while I've wanted to swing back around to making a new one for a while now, the opportunity for another arose first. In exchange for finishing up a kit for a good friend, I ended up with this beauty, a Bachmann Baldwin. And finally, I could make a proper Stanley model. Now, I had a few days to think about what exactly I wanted to do with this model. There was a part of me leaning towards a more traditional Skarloey Railway red, another part of me leaning towards a Smudger-inspired green, and then I remembered the best Stanley I had ever seen, the Chaco Stanley. This render is by Chaco, or Cloudtop Cretan, and shows a beautiful interpretation of the Mid-Sodor American, complete in a darker gunmetal finish, cigar in mouth. It was inevitable, let's be honest. Look at it, it had to happen. So after some talking with Chaco, getting permissions, questions answered, and graciously being sent a face file, work started and was quick. There were a few things I'd have to do that were pretty substantial though. If you notice in the render, this Stanley has a cut down cab and a brake pipe that faces forward, both things that are not present on my Baldwin model. The brake pipe was easy enough, as simple as cutting it off and reattaching it. The cab, however, came down to a Dremel, which always is a bit nerve-wracking, but thankfully came out pretty clean. Later on, I would Dremel the front of the smoke box door too, to allow the face to fit in the center. That was much later on though, and may not be something you have to worry about. I just did to keep consistency with the render. It's kinda hard to tell, but I actually messed up a bit here, and had to rebuild him a new rivet on the top. Next up was removing the decals with a bit of nail polish remover, but paint was something I was a tad worried about. If at any point you want to use the gunmetal made by Tamiya, please keep this part in mind. This is not a paint made for plastics. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use it on plastics, but you have to keep in mind the dangers of what you're doing. Any sort of flexibility will cause cracking unbelievably fast in the drying process. This is a paint that's made to sit on something that doesn't conform to heat, really holds its shape. Thankfully, this is a pretty strong type of plastic though, so a good primer job later, the gunmetal was applied. Personally, I try to do it in very small layers on the chance any cracking does show up. But thankfully, the entire time, he went strong, and has been since. I honestly feel like you'll be fine with gunmetal if you just take your time. Just please keep in mind there is a bit of a risk when you use this paint, or any Tamiya PS paint. Next up was bronze paint for the piping, which of course was done with a paintbrush. And I also should mention I did not remove the plastic from the windows, and instead opted to fill those with clay. The inside of the cab was masked with tape, with the two front portholes each being covered with a circle of that. Thankfully, it comes off pretty easy when you're done. The face file was sent to my good friend Trainstorm, and the moment the face arrived to me, it was started as well. For painting the eyes, I would use a mixture of a small paintbrush and a toothpick. And while the render shows Stanley smoking a shell instead of an actual cigar, I just decided to go full cigar. It was honestly just an easier paint job, and to me just looks really fun. His chin strap was made using a thin paint pen, attached to the front with blue tack. I added some smaller details like a driver in the cab, a cap on the funnel which was made using a N-scale buffer head, and a green tarp on top of the cab, ready to be draped down. This will hopefully tie into a consist I plan to make him, sort of a World War I trench-inspired thing. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to Stanley. Overall, a very simple project, but a very inspired one too. I'm a huge fan of all of Chaco's designs, and to bring one to life was a blast. Huge thank you to him for allowing me the chance. Links below to his other works. I highly recommend his Patreon. But also, it's just so fun to have a model this unique. Like I said, I hope to make a trench consist just for this guy. Maybe some gunpowder vans since he has a cigar and, you know, irony. The good news is, at least for now, he'll be helping out a lot on the N-scale rails. If he starts slipping up too bad though, I could always use a new generator, or a pump for my Minecraft mine. So let's just hope that good behavior keeps up. And now I've kept you from this wonderful valve gear for too long. Let's finally see this dude in action.
Oh, oops. What on earth? Is that, there we go. I was gonna say, someone wants to be a generator.
Either subscribe, donate, or get the fuck out.